Share. All right. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, all praises be to Allah. Peace and blessings be upon our Prophet Muhammad, his family, and his companions. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon you all. Today we will be continuing our fourth part of the religious comparison, talking about the authenticity of the Bible. We've finished the Old Testament. We talked a little bit about the history of Jesus and the history of the people of Israel and how did Jesus come to existence about 2,000 years ago. Today, we're going to be talking about the authenticity of the books of the New Testament. And we talked a little bit about that last time, but today we will be going in depth with some of the verses that they are there. Of course, there are so many, but I just picked some of them. So maybe that will help a little bit to see the difference between what the Christians and the church says and what does the Bible really says. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So woe to those who write the scripture with their own hands, then say, this is from Allah, in order to exchange it for a small price. Woe to them for what their hands have written, and woe to them for what they earn. So when we talk about the story of Jesus or the biography of Jesus, we have to read the four Gospels that they are written in the New Testament, and they are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we talked about Mark was the first book that to be written, and then Matthew. And Matthew and Mark are very much similar, and they are pretty much like identical. But if you go to Luke, it drifts away from the Jewish perspective of Jesus and their thoughts. And then you go to John, which is totally different, and it talks about, it indulges into the divinity of Jesus. If we read Matthew 2 and 3, it talks about Jesus when he was a child and how he was born and so on. And then after that, it jumps from him being a child to him being an adult when he was 30 years old. When he was 30 years old. So there's about at least 25 years that they are lost in Jesus' life. Of course, there are so many myths and so many stories around what happened in Jesus' life in the first 25 years. Some of those, they wrote a gospel, talk about Jesus when he left the city or the Palestine, and he went all the way to India to learn, and get the knowledge from from the Hindu people, and then come back with that, superpowers being Jesus and so on. Some people, they say that no, he joined the eccentric group, and they are like, how we have the Sufi, that they go to the caves and sit there for so many days, just meditate and so on. So he did the same thing, and that's where we get actually the Dead Sea Scrolls. They say the ones who actually wrote them were not, they were Jews, but they were waiting for the coming of Jesus, and they were eccentric and so on. So that's what they believe in. Of course, we don't have any solid manuscripts or anything written about Jesus' life between his life when he was 2 years until about 30 years. So we have about 25 to 28 years that it is lost. We don't know anything about it. We don't know what happened to him. How did he learn the religion? How did he become a prophet? All these things, we have no idea. We have no idea. So we see that the books, the four books of the Gospels are actually missing a lot about Jesus' life. Also, when we read the four Gospels, and we try to compare and get all the similar stories together. You see that like in Matthew always say like, and then after that, right away, this is what happened. Right away, this is what happened. And if you actually compile all the events of Jesus Christ and put them in days, you will see that the whole stories and the biography of Jesus is compiled in only like 10 days total, 10 to 15 days total. So Jesus supposed to be a prophet from 30 years to 33 years. That means we have about 3 years of work and being a prophet, of his life. However, the four books, all of them, the four books really don't talk about Jesus' life except in very glimpse and very small stories and short stories that they don't actually exceed than 15 days. Does that make sense? Okay. Now here's another example. Give me 1 second. There's so much noise. Give me 1 second. Uh, معلش سامحوني. I'm sorry about that. Okay. So, then let me give you another example, and the example is actually in the story of in John 8, and this story actually was mentioned only in John 8. It wasn't mentioned in Matthew or Mark or Luke. It was only mentioned in John 8. And when you really study the style of writing, you will see that this story was inserted later on in the gospel. And it is said that it did not actually exist before in John, in the Gospel of John, but it was added in the 16th century. And the story is very, very famous. It's the story of what we call the adulteress, the woman who comes to Jesus, or not comes to Jesus. She would be like taken by the other Jews that they wanted to stone her because she committed fornication and adultery, and they're supposed to be killing her, but then Jesus stopped them. And then what he does, he writes something on the ground with a stick. So everyone reads what is written, and then he says, whoever is without sin, let him or her stone her first. And then what they do is they just throw all the rocks and walk away. And then Jesus tells her that she is forgiven, right? Now, if we really read this story, first of all, it's a whole different style of writing than the whole John. The second thing, it seems that it was inserted and there was a flow in the biography, but then after that, you see that this story was like inserted right in the middle, and then it was and it was in there that it actually breaks the flow of the writings, and it breaks the flow of the story. So if we can read over here in verse 1, it says, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Then in verse 2, it says, early in the morning, he came again into the temple. Okay, so again, all of these were in the morning. The Mount of Olive is really like far away from the temple. So, and both of them were done in the morning. So, and then after that, it talks about the story of this woman that she committed adultery. So, did he actually go to the mountain of olives, or did he go to the temple and then he found this woman? So you see that this story was inserted, and that actually really like makes you doubt about the authenticity of the Gospel of John. Okay, and then it says over here, and then after that on verse 12, it says, and then Jesus again spoke to them, as it is like, it is not really continuing of the story. It's supposed to be like from 1 to 12. 12 supposed to be number 2. And then this 2 is actually was not there. It was inserted later. And then it talks about the story for either like 10 verses. Then it goes to this one right here. Okay. I hope that makes sense, inshallah. Also, another contradiction that we see about Jesus' resurrection. Now, they say that Jesus was crucified, and we see that the story of the crucifixion mentioned in the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But then after that, we have the story of resurrection. That means after 3 days, Jesus actually was raised out of the dead. But if we compare between 2 books or 3 books of the Gospels, we see that there are different stories. Like one time Jesus was raised in the 2nd day, and one time, and then another Gospel talks about Jesus as he was raised in the 3rd day after the 3rd night. So there is some kind of a contradiction. On the top of that, after the resurrection, what really happened? So I'm going to tell you about those women who came to visit Jesus. And in each gospel has a different story. Like in Mark 16:1, it says, when the Sabbath, which is the Saturday, was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so that they might come and anoint him. Very early on the 1st day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. They were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? Looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away. Although it was extremely large, entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe, and they were amazed. And he said to them, do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus, the Nazarene, who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. Behold, here is the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is again ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. They went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. So those women, they left the tomb and they did not say anything, although the man who was in the tomb told them to go and tell the people that, or the disciples, that Jesus was risen, but they didn't say anything. Now, in the story in Luke 24:1, you see something totally different. You see that, but on the 1st day of the week, they went blah, 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 blah. And then again, it says here, why do you seek? And then after that, they see 2 men. They don't see only 1 man. They see 2 men. So that's one contradiction. The other thing is over here at the end, they say, and they remembered his words and returned from the tomb and reported all these things to the 11 and to all the rest. So they went and told everyone. So which one is the correct story, Mark or Luke? Did they actually go or they didn't go? Did they see only 1 person or did they see 2 people? Okay, and so you see that there is some kind of contradiction in the stories and the biography of Jesus. When you try to compare the similar stories, of course, there are different events in each gospel that they are different, but they're not identical. And there are different events and different, things that happen in the story. We have also some historical problems. You see in Luke 1, if you read it, it says, now in those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. When Jesus was born, and in the same year, Caesar, the Caesar, which is the Al-Qaisar, he made a command that everyone that is born in Palestine, they have to go to the city where they were born and register their name so they can get the population and the numbers of the people that they're living in that place. So you see that Mary, peace be upon her, when she was pregnant, she took Joseph with her, who became her husband, okay? And she went all the way from the Galilee to the city of Nazareth to go and register their name over there. And then in the city of Nazareth, Jesus was born. All right. Now, if we go back to the Roman history, we will not find one manuscript or one letter from Caesar asking such a command to take everyone to go to the city where they were born. And just imagine if we have all these people just move from one city to another, it'll be a mess of all these movement that is going, the mass movement of the people going from one city to another. So the author had something in his mind. He had a motivation. That's what we call in the theological terminology etiology. So etiology, that means that it's a Latin word, or it means that the motivation. What is the motivation of the author to make Mary, Virgin Mary, to move from Galilee all the way to Nazareth? The only thing is that the writer of Luke wants to say that Jesus was born in Nazareth. So he needed a reason for Mary to go to Nazareth. And that was the reason, is to go there and write her name and register her name for the population reason. Okay. So the story of that is not actually mentioned. Also, there is another story. The story of the King Herod, which is the king of the Jews, when he knew that there is another king that is born, that he made a command that any children that they are under 2 years old and they are males, to be killed, to be killed. Now, if you go back to the history of Romans and the Jews, you will not find any document where the King Herod actually make any command to kill any children under 2 years old. Also, in the same year, Mary and Joseph, they flee from Nazareth and they go all the way to Egypt, and they live there for another 2 years until Jesus becomes 4 years old, and then they go back to Palestine. That's what the story says in Matthew 3. So again, there is an etiology over here. The motivation is what of that author? He wants Mary to go all the way to Egypt and find a reason why Mary went to Egypt. And the reason why is because she was under persecution, because her child was about to be killed. And so that's why he made up this story and created this story, which is not exist in the Bible, or in the history, but they made it exist in the Gospels to say that we need a reason for Jesus to do this, or his mother to do this. So they made her go all the way to Egypt. They made her go all the way to Nazareth, and so on. So that's the story behind those two. Now let's talk a little bit about the lineage of Jesus. The lineage of Jesus. You will see that Matthew talks about the lineage of Jesus and Luke talks about the lineage of Jesus. But if we take those two together and we make comparison between the lineage of Matthew and the lineage of Luke, you will see the difference right now. Let me show you. Okay, so here is one. And that is in chapter 1, Matthew, right? And let me go ahead and read it for you. It says the book. Now what I'm going to do is, instead of doing that, I'm going to share the screen instead of sharing the so I can show you the difference right here. Hold on. Okay. And then I'm going to take Luke, and I'm going to put Luke over there. No, that's in Arabic. No, it's trying to make it in English. Luke, here's the English version. We're going to do some kind of comparison over here between this and, okay. Let me just make this bigger. There we go. All right. So let's talk a little bit let's read Matthew first. Okay, so over here. So the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Then Abraham begot Isaac, Isaac begot Jacob, and then Judas, right? Then from Judas came Phares and Zara and Tamar, and Phares begot Esrom, and Esrom begot Aram, and then Aminadab, and Aminadab begot Nason and Solomon, and so on. Buz and Jesse, David, Solomon, and then Rabuam, and then Asa, Abia, and then Asa, and then Josaphat, and then Ozias, and then Joatham, and then Ezekias, and then Manasseh, and then Josias, and Jeconias, and Salathiels, and then Zerubbabel, and then Zerubbabel, we have Abiud, and then Elikim, and then Eliakim. I'm sorry, if I'm just saying the words wrong, I'm just slaughtering the names over here. Azor, and then Saduk, and then Ashim, and then Ashim, Eliud, and Eliud begot Eleazar, and then Eleazar begot Matan, and then after that we have Jacob, Joseph, husband of Mary. So you see that here the lineage is from Joseph perspective. Although Joseph is not the biological father of Jesus, Joseph elegantly married Mary after she has her baby, okay, or when she was actually pregnant with Jesus, because she didn't want to have a bad reputation. And by the way, it is said in the books of the Orthodox that Joseph was 95 years old when he married Mary. She was 12 years old and she has a baby. And now we're making fun of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who married at 12 years old. She was actually an adult and she reached the puberty, and we call him pedophile, just saying. So that's the double standard of the West. Again, now let's talk about chapter 3 of Luke, right? So Luke goes, I think, the backward, but let's say now in the 15th of, I think it starts down here. It starts, let me see. Okay, here we go. Okay. And Jesus himself began to be about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph. Again, here also the son of Joseph, which was the son of Heli. All right, let's go down here and see if that's correct. Okay, and Jacob begot Joseph. Okay, hold on. So the father here is Heli, the father here is Jacob. I see there is some difference over here. But then we have Matat, which is here Mathan. Okay, it's okay. I mean, there's some just difference in the, was the son of Levi, which was the son of Melchi. Okay, I don't see him right here. The son of Jannah, which was the son of Joseph, which was the son of Matthias, which was the son of Amos, which was Naum, which was the son of Isli, the son of Negi. And you see that all these names are different than here. And some of their names are actually mentioned in one of them, but another one, they just show only 39 or 40 names because they want to say that there's only 40 generations from the time of David, peace be upon him, until the time of Jesus, which is actually untrue, okay? And then it goes all the way, was the son of Judah, and then we have all these names. So I want you guys, if you have the time, to see the difference between the book of Luke and the book of Matthew, Matthew 1 and Luke 3, and you will see that the al-ansab means the lineage is totally different than each other. On the top of that, we see that in one of the lineages, they mention names of women. They mention names of women. And these women actually are supposed to be the ancestors or the grandmothers of Jesus. But if we look at their reputation, you'll see that many, like those women have been prostitutes and they were not even Jews. So for example, we have the story of Judas and Tamar. Tamar actually, she committed zina with Judas in order to have a child. And because of that, she had the baby. And then the baby, of course, was one of the grandparents of Jesus. Same thing with Rahab. Rahab was actually called Rahab az-Zaniya, means Rahab the adultery, the adulteress, okay? David, peace be upon him, married Bathsheba, who was the wife of Uriah, and he married her by force, right? He slept with her and she became pregnant, and then he killed her husband Uriah, right? As we mentioned last time. And Dawood supposed to be the grandfather of Jesus, peace be upon him. Now let's talk about what is the ruling of the committing adultery in the Old Testament. All right. If we look over here, and it is in I'm trying to find it, I'm sorry. The book of Deuteronomy, and let's see over here, Control F. Oh, can't find it. Actually, I can just go ahead and Google it and it will show me. Enter in the congregation of the Lord. Okay, a bastard. Bastard means the child of the one who commit adultery. So the one who commits adultery and have a child from the adulteress, that's called a bastard. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Subhanallah. So that is the rulings of a bastard. Jesus, according to their books, he's considered a bastard. Subhanallah. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Astaghfirullah al-Azim. Right? All right, let's go back. Let me go back here. And continue our lecture, inshallah. All right. Now, let's talk a little bit about the letters, okay? If you read Luke 1, you will see that it is actually not a gospel, but it is a letter. Someone was writing a letter to somebody else. And I'm going to read Luke 1 to see what it said over here. It says, for as much as many have taken in hand to set forth in order a declaration of those things which are most surely believed among us, even as they delivered them unto us, which from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. So the person who is writing who is writing the book of Luke never saw Jesus. He never saw Jesus. He never lived with Jesus. He's not one of the disciples. But he says that I got the stories from people who actually saw Jesus, that they were actually witnesses. It seems good to me, the writer is talking about himself. He says, it seems good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things from the very first, or to write unto thee in order, most excellent Theophilus. So there is a guy, his name is Theophilus, and he was writing a letter for him and wrote the story or the biography of Jesus to him with, like, saying that he actually got the stories from the eyewitnesses, and that those people, they saw Jesus. In other words, that he was taking the word of mouth of people. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. All right, so this is one. Let me show you even more. Now, A'mal al-Rusul, which is Acts, are supposed to be the history of the church. Again, if we read Acts 1, you will see that the person who wrote it, again, here you go, the former treatise have I made, O Theophilus. So who's Theophilus? It seems like many people, they say that ones who wrote the book of Acts is the same person who wrote also the Gospel of Luke, because he's writing this the same, like he mentioned the same name, like, when he sent that letter to Theophilus, he sent it to the same person. So they say, okay, maybe he's the same person. And also they found that there is some similarity in the way of writing. But who's Luke? We don't know who's Luke. Who's the writer? Is he really Luke who wrote it? We don't know, because he does not mention his name in the book. All right. So that's for Acts. Let's talk about John, the letter of John, 2nd 13. 1:13. Okay. The children of thy elect sister greet thee. I don't know who's, it says like, say salam, or, greet those people for me in the church. So this person is writing a personal letter to the church members, and he's saying, please greet those people for me. Let's talk about the third letter of John from 1 to 4. It says, the elder unto well-beloved Gaius, I don't know who's Gaius, who I love in the truth. So this person loved Gaius. Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. For I rejoice greatly when the brethren came and testified of the truth that is in thee, even as thou walkest in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in the truth, beloved. And then let's go down here. It says, I had many things to write, but I will not with ink and pen write unto thee. But I trust I shall shortly see thee. That means I will see you soon, and we shall speak face to face. Peace be to you. Okay, our friends salute thee. Greet the friends by name. So he's writing a letter, right? I mean, do you think a person like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, will write a letter to people like this and say, hey, say salam to this, say hi to them, to this person, and greet him, and we're going to see him soon? I mean, come on, really? So you see that those are letters are not actually, the books of God. There's no way that this is a revelation from God. Why would God reveal a book that now in our days after 2000, we don't know who's Stephen Lois, we don't know who is this person, we don't know who are these people that they are greeting. There is no use of them. There's no use for them. And if it is a revelation from God, it should be good for every time and there are not supposed to be any personal messages in there, right? So let's talk about here the book of Corinthians 16:19 and 20. Look over here. It says, the churches of Asia salute you, Aquila and Priscilla. So there is two sisters, Aquila, or like I think they're a couple. I think Aquila is the man and Priscilla is the woman. Aquila and Priscilla salute you much in the Lord, with the church that is in their house. All the brethren greet you. Greet ye one another with no holy kiss, with an holy kiss. The salutation of me, Paul, with mine own hand. Now, this one actually Paul wrote, or like it's allegedly Paul wrote to Aquila and Priscilla and the people of the church. So again, these books or these letters, there is no way that they are from God. They are handmade. A person who wrote them as, let's say, a religious letter to those people, and he mentioned specific names, personal names in the church, saying that that we do this for just to greet them and talk to them about God and so on. So now my next question is, who wrote Acts and who wrote the Hebrew? Now, some people, they say that the person who wrote Acts, as I showed you, is the same person who wrote Luke, the Gospel of Luke, but we don't have any like proof to that. And even Bart Ehrman in his book Forged, he says that the one who wrote Acts could be that he wanted to just continue the work of the author, of the previous author, and he wrote the book of Acts as it is a continuation of the Gospel of Luke. But there is no proof to that. Also, no one knows who wrote Hebrew. No one knows who wrote Hebrew, which is like the teachings of the Christianity, but with, like I can say, like under the shadows of the teachings of the Old Testament and the Jews. And many people, they say, by the way, that or many scholars, they say that the person who wrote Hebrew is very educated person, because there is so many sophisticated words, and the one who wrote it is obvious to be educated and could be a priest, that he was a priest. And that's why many people think that the one who wrote Hebrews is actually Paul himself, because Paul was a priest. He knew how to write, he knew how to read, and he knew a lot of the scriptures of the Old Testament. And so they say that the one who wrote Hebrew could be Paul, but there is no proof to that. There is no proof to that. Okay. Now, when we talk about the letters of Paul, and I want to go a little bit talking about the history of Paul. Yesterday, Shema asked me about, I think was Shema or Asma, who says that, isn't Paul used to be an enemy of the Jews or the Christians? Yes, he was. His name was Shaul, or Saul in English. And he was a person that he hated the Christians and he wanted to kill them all. And he got a letter from the king and from the priests to go himself and kill the Christians himself, or the followers of Jesus. And that's what he did. He actually went ahead and in his way to Tarsus, to the east, to the west of Syria, basically, he saw a vision that it blinded him, and he heard a sound saying that, why are you doing this, and you are persecuting, and then subhanallah, he became a Christian after that, and he started calling for Christianity, of course his own version of Christianity, to the people of the non-Jews. Okay. Yeah, basically she says like he killed them in a different way. He distorted it, of course. Yes, correct, Shema. Very good. Yes, subhanallah. That's another way to put it, right? Yeah, and so that's what he did. Yeah, he really did that. He distorted it, and he put different ideologies from the Romans, because he wanted to come closer to the Romans. And so he brought the idea that, hey, we're actually praying to Jesus because, that's what makes us closer to God. And we cannot reach to God except by Jesus, and so on. And that he is the only way. And because of that, people started to see Jesus as God, and they start worshiping Jesus. By the way, there is a book called Paul Was Not a Christian, for Pamela Eisenhower. She's a Christian Jew who wrote this book, and I love it so much because it talks about little bit about the background of the Jews and what they believed of Jesus and what they believed of the prophets in the Old Testament. And then how Paul came and he kind of like, as you said, distorted the religion and make it to be more suitable for the ones in the West, in Europe, that the polytheists and so on. Now, there is also, if we read the letters of Paul, we see a lot of discrepancies and differences in the story that he talks about himself when he talks about his testimony. We call it the testimony about his experience, how he saw the vision. We see it in two different places, and there is a contradiction. So one time he says that he only saw the light, but he didn't hear any voice. The second was like that he did not see any light, but he heard a voice. And we see some discrepancies. But let me talk a little bit about the 14 letters of Paul. There's supposed to be 14 letters of Paul. Only 6 of them that they are considered authentic to Paul because of the style of writing and the wordings and the way that they were written. Those are the Romans, 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, Galatian or Galatia, Philippians, and First Thessalonians, and then Philemon. Those are the 7 letters, and even Philemon, there is a debate on that. Now, there is what we call Pseudo-Pauline epistles. What pseudo means like muntahale, like it is altered, changed, or like it is forged, okay? And those were actually they're debatable whether they're written by Paul or not written by Paul. And those are the Ephesians, Colossians, First Thessaloniki, First Timothy, and Second Timothy, and Titus. Those are because they have different writing style than the first one. They say maybe that Paul really wrote them in like later in his life and his style was changed, or maybe not. But there are some letters that it is 100%. All of the scholars, no discussion, they say that they don't fit with the category of the writings of Paul, and they see them as they are pseudo epistles, that they are forged letters. Someone wrote them in the name of Paul just because he wants to put his own ideologies in there. So, for example, like Laodiceans, 3rd Corinthians, and Hebrew. Those are the 3 books. And the thing about those, like let's say about the, those, over here, we see in the First Thessaloniki talking about the woman that she should wear a hijab in the church or in the presence of God. She should be like silence, and she's not supposed to be having any say. And if she has any question, she should be asking her husband at home, and she can be only saved if she has children, right? That's for the First Thessalonians, okay? But in the Second Thessalonians, you see that Paul is talking about women, that they are equal with the man, that she has a vote, she can vote, and all these things. So that's why we see some kind of contradiction in the ideologies of Paul. So maybe someone who actually forged the letters and impersonated Paul to put his own ideology and make the church, follow his own ideas. So Shaima says, so Paul is an important figure in the Christianity, or can we say he is the founder of Christianity? Yes. And they call him also the messenger, Rasul al-Umamiyin, the messenger of the Gentiles, because like Peter and all the other disciples who saw Jesus, they were Jews, and they did not want to go like they did not want to go beyond Judaism, and they did not want to go because they saw that Jesus say that I only came to the lost sheep of Israel. أتيت فقط لخراف إسرائيل الضالة. But what Paul said, no. Paul said, no, this is a religion supposed to be universal, and we're going to go beyond the Judaism, and we're going to go to the West. Although, by the way, in spite of the fact that the first person to go to the Gentiles and calling the teachings of Jesus was Peter. But then Peter and Paul sat together, and they kind of like got some kind of this, they got into some kind of disputation, and each person got into their own path. But then Paul continued the journey and the legacy of Peter, and he's the one who actually made most of the work to go to the Gentiles and preach to the Gentiles who are not Jews about the teachings of Jesus. Does that make sense, inshallah? So let's look at more examples of Paul's letters. So if I go, for example, to the 2 Timothy 1:3-5, here's 1:3-5. It says, I thank God, whom I serve from my forefathers with pure conscience, that without ceasing I have remembrance of thee in my prayers night and day, greatly desiring to see you, being mindful of thy tears, that I may be filled with joy. So he wanted to see that church, and he was like so excited. So he put some kind of like personal letters and personal feelings in those letters, right? Yeah. All right, so we have also the 2 Timothy 4:13-21. Let's see what he says over here. The clock that I left at Taos. So he had a clock. He had like a jacket that he left with Taos, with Carpus. He says, when you come, bring it with you. So he was just giving an advice to his friend, Carpus. He told him, hey, listen, I left my jacket in that city, somewhere. If you find it, just bring it with you, and the books that you have, to Alexander, and so I can see you, and I will take them from you. I'm like, is that really a book of God? God will put like some personal messages like that. Hey, it's like I'm sending an email or a text message. Hey, I left my jacket. Can you bring it to me, please? I mean, come on. Okay, let's say Romans 16:1-21. Okay, I commend unto the Phoebe. There's a Phoebe, our sister, which is a servant of the church with the, and then that ye receive her in the Lord as becometh saints, and that ye assist. So he's talking about, and then here again, greet Priscilla and Aquila. Again, this is the second time he mentions them. Okay, and then he also mentioned Epaphras, who is the first fruits of the Achaia unto Christ. Greet Mary. I don't know who Mary is. And then we have salute Andronicus and Junia and kinsmen. All these men that he salute, Obran, Apelles, Herodion, Tryphena, Rufus. Okay, so all these names, look at that. All of these names that they are mentioned, like that he wants, like the person who wrote Romans, of course, they say it was Paul. He wants the church to salute and greet all these people in the church for being members in the church, of course, right? And I mean, is that really, like, what is the benefit from that? What is the use of having all these names, personal messages and letters in here? It just doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's look at Titus 13:12 and 13 here. When I shall send Artemas unto thee, or Tychicus, be diligent to come unto me to Nicopolis, for I have determined there to winter. Yeah, it means like I'm going to stay there for winter. Bring Zenas, the lawyer, and Apollos on their journey diligently, that nothing be wanting unto them. I don't understand if a Christian comes and read this, is he going to say, hallelujah, that really speaks to my heart? and there is a great lesson from it. I just don't understand, like, how does that work? Okay, now let's look at the Philippi 2:26-8. For he longed after you all and was full of heaviness, because that ye had heard that he had been sick. I don't know who's that. He was sick. I think that was talking about this guy over here. I can't even say his name. Epaphroditus. Oh, I said it right. Epaphroditus. For indeed he was sick nigh unto death, but God had mercy on him, and not on him only, but on me also, lest I should have sorrow upon sorrow. So he was sick, but then God healed him or cured him, right? So what I'm saying over here, like, if really those letters are a revelation from God, you know, they should only be teachings. Why do we have some personal messages in here saying that, hey, if you find my jacket, just bring it with you, or like, say hi to this person, or say hi to that person? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? That's why, you know, Allah says in the Quran, responding to that, says, and mentioned, O Muhammad, when Allah took a covenant from those who were given the scriptures, saying, you must make it clear to the people and not conceal it, but they threw it away behind their books, behind their backs, and exchanged it for a small price, and wretched is that which they purchased. Now, the last book I want to talk about is the Revelation. And the Revelation is very, very complicated book that no one can actually understand it. Who wrote it? Nobody knows. It is suspected that the person who wrote it was John, the same writer of the Gospel of John. But there is not really like a proof saying that John himself wrote the book. The second thing is he used symbols and symbols and marks, let's say, to point about something, and to conceal some kind of information. And these information is supposed to be secretive, and only people can understand it are the people of the churches, because the ones he writes that. It's like a revelation is like a letter that it was written to the 7 churches that they were formed after 100 years after Jesus, about 120 years after Jesus. Now you're talking about those 7 churches that they were formed after like 120 years. So how old was John if he actually was the disciple of John who wrote the Gospel of John and he saw Jesus? How old was he when he wrote the Revelation? Many people, they say he was about 120 years, which is actually not true. And we cannot say that actually, that John was the one who wrote it, right? Okay, so why did he write it? Because about 80 AD or 90 AD, there is a tyrant king emerged. His name was Neron, Niron, and he was an oppressor against those who followed Jesus. And he killed so many of them. He was torturing them to death, and he was torching them, like means lighting them in the Roman theaters to make them as lights when they do those big events like the Olympic events. They used to take those Christians and throw them in the middle of the theaters and make them wrestle with animals like lions and tigers, until they are killed and eaten by those animals. They were killed, and some of them, they were lit and they were burnt alive, and so on. So he also enslaved many of them. One of them was John, that's what they say, John. And then he was exiled to an island called Putmos. I think that's the name of it. Yes, Putmos in Arabic. I don't know what's the name of it in English. Maybe it's the same name, right? And then in that era, he wrote these letters and he sent them to the churches where they can read it. And so he talks about like an animal with 7 heads, and there is a woman with red dress that she drinks and she commits adultery and she does things. And then there is this woman that she's about to have a child, and then she has a child, but then an angel comes and take the child and raise him up to the sky. So it's like all these like, all these like symbols that you feel that you're watching a movie of like sci-fi or some kind of fantasy movies, right? But they say, the scholars, they say that John intended to write it this way because he didn't want the one who reads the letter understand what the letter meant, but the people of the church could understand. And because of that, this book was interpreted and translated in so many ways. And each church, of course, has their own interpretation. There's there are the modern, there are the classics, and I actually have another lecture about the book of Revelation, and I kind of like try uh, to compare it with the science. Called, like, if you go back to my YouTube, and there is Alamatu Sa'a in Arabic. Actually, I wrote it, but there is also, I think I talked a little bit in English about it. I'm not really sure, I don't remember. Anyway, so what is it talking about? As I said, I talked about that. Is there a way to solve the symbols? Until now, there is not a person who could really solve the symbols and say these are the symbols and what they mean and what they meant. There are some symbols that they are very, they're very known, and we can tell that those are the symbols are really like what they meant. But there are other symbols that we can't really understand what did the writer or the author meant with them. And of course, like it talks about, they say it talks about the end of the days and what's going to happen in the future. And then how, when Jesus comes, that he's going to rule for about 1,000 year. And this is also debatable. Did he actually going to be ruling 1,000 year on earth? Or is that just, an era that we're going to live of peace, right? We call it the Messianic era. And then after that, it talks about the heaven and hellfire, and how does the heaven look like and the hellfire looks like, and so on. What happened to the righteous and what happened to the evil people. All right, so some people, they went ahead and they did a demonstration of the book of Revelation with a timeline. So it talks about the timeline starts from here, from Jesus Christ when he was crucified, and then the formation of the churches, the 7 churches, right? And then after that, so we are basically are in this era over here. And then we have the 7 years that they are very, like, they're going to be very hard years. And then at the end, that there's the millennium, which is 1,000 year when Jesus is going to come. And then Israel is going to be, will have a victory. And then Jesus is going to rule with Israel. And that Israel is going to be on the top of all the other nations, while all the other nations is going to be blessed by Israel. Of course, you can tell that the ideology of the West supporting Israel to establish the state of Israel in the Middle East is actually taken from the book of Revelation. And I have a whole, lecture about this, about the second coming of Jesus, and how is this impacting the politics in our days, because subhanAllah, although they say they're secular and they have nothing to do with religion and so on, but most of their teachings and all the things that they do is derived from their own religious teachings, and then what is happening in heavens, and what happened to the martyrs when they die and so on. It's a long book, and I have actually an explanation of it that I made myself, and I made some kind of comparison between what is the book of Revelation saying and with the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, of alamat as-sa'a, the end of the days, and the marks of the end of the days, and then what happened to the Satan over here, Shaitan, and what happened to the enemies of God, and so on in the end. Okay. So this is the demonstration of the book of the Revelation. Okay. Now my question is, after I talked about all the books in the Bible itself, My question is, why don't Christians bother themselves in learning the truth? Why don't they want to know the truth, and they are stuck with their ideology saying that, okay, the book of, of the Bible is correct 100%, no matter what, even if they have all these contradictions, even if they have personal letters, even if they have agendas, etiologies, all these things, we don't care. As long as it feels good when we read it, then there is no problem. And that's why so many people, they don't even read the history of the Bible. They don't even read the lineages. They don't read the names of the tribes and the kings and all these things, because these are all irrelevant, and they're just like for historical preferences for them. And all what they do is, like, when they are feeling worry or anxiety, they just go through these, selective, they select, of course, selective verses, or sentences that makes them feel good and give them some hope. Basically, they're like some quotes, from Matthew or John or Colossians, that makes them feel good, that, hey, don't worry, God is with you. God is not going to be abandon you, because you are the one who are strong, and the enemy is defeated, and so on. That's all what they, that's all what they read about in the Bible. That's all what they believe in. Okay, inshallah. Yeah. And yeah, just like you said, Jesus loves you. That's all what they talk about. Jesus loves you, without any, like, they don't use their brain. Okay, so most of them don't know their Bible, and they never read it. And they say the error of the translation was less than 5%, which I actually showed you that it's way more than that. And they say not important, as long as the Bible is guiding to better feelings. Okay. And then not knowing the writer gives a sense of higher status. So when I told them, okay, who wrote the book of Hebrew? Who wrote the book of John? Who wrote the book of Malachi? Who wrote the book of Obadiah? They say, well, it's not really important. Those are all anonymous. Anonymous, that means unknown, majhul, unknown. Well, why are you believing in a book you don't know who the writer is? Because, oh, well, the feeling of a person, we don't know who wrote it, that actually gives you like a feeling of assurance that the one who wrote this book is God himself. That's why. So it shows, like, it gives them like this feeling of exaltness, this feeling of exaltness, right? So finally, what triggers me from all of this, the high criticism class is an obligatory class to be taken in the theology seminaries, with which graduate pastors and evangelical missionaries. Yet we find that the ones who graduate the seminary never teach this in the church, and they hide the truth. Maybe because they don't see the issue as important. Maybe it's useless for the people to know the truth, as long as giving the people the hope that they need to go on in their life. As they say, never let a good story be in the way of the truth, right? So when I was actually studying at the Southwestern Baptist Seminary in 2011, and I was taking the class of the Old Testament, and it was a high criticism talking about the manuscripts of the Bible. He was talking about all these contradictions in the Bible, until one of the pastors, he was actually doing his master degree, or I think PhD, and he was sitting there, and we were like all like, wow, what is going on? Like, what, all of this, like every time is like, what's going on, right? So he was like, he said, how come? So everyone looked at this pastor, and he said, how come we believe in a book that is considered the book of God, yet we see all these contradictions, all these changes in it, and we still believe as it is in the book of God. So the doctor said to us, he said, it is not necessary to have the Bible with no mistakes in order to believe in it, because if the Old Testament came to us the way it was written, then it wouldn't be beneficial for our days. God permitted the changes and used the scribes to copy, alter, take off, and add on scriptures in order to receive the Bible the way it is in our days, to understand it in a deeper aspect, and to fit our modern culture. That was his answer. What a great justification of saying that the Bible is still the book of God. After all that, like he's teaching us that the book is altered, changed. If God does not change, his book shouldn't be also changed. His revelation is not supposed to be changed. And now, yet, he's justifying all that, saying that it's okay as long as it fits our modern day. And I'm so curious, how is the Bible going to be after 1,000 years? I'm just saying, no, I don't know. So, yes, as you said, they are always speaking on behalf of God, and that's where Jesus, peace be upon him in the Bible, warns about all these, false prophets, that they speak on behalf of God, thinking that they know the word of God. Well, thank you so much for listening to me and being with me today. I hope that you enjoyed our lecture. I think this is enough for today, because now we covered all the authenticity of the Bible. If you have any question about the authenticity of the Bible, go ahead. Next time, we're going to start with what we call the about salvation, about the Trinity. We're going to talk about the salvation, the Trinity, the divinity of Jesus. All these things, inshallah, going to be in the next lecture, bi'idhnillah. Any questions so far? Any question so far about the authenticity of the manuscripts of the Bible? بارك الله فيكم. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله العظيم. If I say something right, then it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I say something wrong, then it is from myself or from shaitan, and I ask Allah for forgiveness. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. جزاكم الله خير all for listening. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. I love you all for the sake of Allah. I see you later.